Accepting mortality is pretty easy when we're young and healthy. When the end is near, it gets a little more challenging. If you haven't already, I would really encourage you to buy this book, Being Mortal by Dr. Atul Gawande. I believe it's one of the most important books of this century so far. Dr. Gawande talks about how we can live and the choices we can make regarding the way we die in this book. And when he's visiting with someone who has a terminal diagnosis, he asks a series of questions, and I want to share those with you now. The first question is, what is your understanding of your condition? And then, what are your fears if your condition worsens? What are your goals in the time you have left? What trade-offs are you willing to make? What makes life worth living? I have two friends who died in the last couple of years, and they were both lovely, lovely women, and they each took a very different approach to how they lived the end of their lives. And I want to introduce them to you now. Grace was just a beautiful woman in her early 70s. She had recently remarried after losing her first husband, and then she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And she underwent treatments for about a year. And then one day she went into the doctor and he said, you know, Grace, this isn't working. I want to try something else. And she said, okay, so tell me what the side effects are going to be. And he did. And she said, and if I do this, how much longer do you think I might live? And he said, 5 to 7 months. And she said, and if I stop all treatment and I don't do anything, how long will I live? And he said, oh, maybe 5 to 7 weeks. And she said, okay, I'm done. Thank you very much. I'm not going to do any more treatments. She left the doctor's office, went home, called one of our best friends, and told her about the diagnosis. And our friend said, what do you want to do, Grace? And she said, I want to have a party. So this was on a Monday, and on Friday night, a group of Grace's friends all gathered on the rooftop of a building in downtown Salem, Oregon, and we had a party. We had food and music and dancing and games, and it was a very special night. And I'll never forget when Grace and her husband walked into that party. They were both wearing cruise wear. They were dressed in white, and she had on a beautiful long skirt and a top, and he was wearing a white, very classy Panama hat. And they were a stunning couple. And that night we laughed, we cried, we sang, we danced, we played games, and we had the opportunity to tell Grace how much we loved her, how much we would miss her, and how happy we were that she was a part of our lives. And she went home, they engaged hospice, and for the next several weeks, the family and the hospice people were there, and they made sure that Grace did not suffer. Her pain was controlled, and she died a very dignified death with as little pain as possible. Now, my friend Vicky chose a different path. She was in her early 60s, and she had not been married for very long, just about four years, when she was diagnosed with a glioblastoma brain tumor. And she did all sorts of treatments, and it was not looking good. In April, I took her out for lunch, and I asked her the questions that Dr. Gawande asks. And I said, so Vicki, what is your understanding of your condition? And she said, well, I'm terminal. I know that I'm terminal. I know that, there isn't anything else we can do. I didn't qualify for any of the trials. And so then I said, what are your fears if your condition worsens? And she says, well, I'm not really afraid of it. I know it's going to worsen. That's just the way it is. And I said, so what are your goals in the time you have left? What's important to you now? And she said, I want to live till September. I want to celebrate my 5th wedding anniversary with Tom. And I said, okay. And I said, so what trade-offs are you willing to make? What are you willing to endure to live to celebrate that anniversary? And she said, almost anything. And it's like, oh, okay, which she did. And I will tell you, it was a difficult, difficult thing to watch. She took mountains of pills and medication that made her swell up and retain fluid. I think she gained probably 100 or 120 pounds in the last several months of her life. It was just her husband and his sister who were there to take care of her. And managing her body was incredibly difficult. And it was just such a sad thing to observe. And finally, 10 days before she died, her doctor said, I think you need to go into hospice now. And so they did. And she died. And I was so angry. I cannot tell you how furious I was with her doctor. Why had the doctor not recommended hospice earlier? They could have provided so much support. They come in, sometimes they play music, there can be relief for the family members. They can offer spiritual counseling and guidance in dealing with death. They could have made sure that there was no suffering. And hospice never does anything to speed up the end of a person's life, but they can certainly make the end a lot less painful for the person who's dying as well as their family. And I was hopping mad. And it wasn't long after she died that I was talking to a friend of mine who was a hospice nurse, and I was just railing on and on about the doctor and being mad about why he had not put Vicki into hospice care sooner. And she said, Elaine, that was Vicki's choice. She told you clearly that she wanted to live until September to celebrate her wedding anniversary. And she told you that she was willing to endure almost anything to reach that goal. Well, she didn't live until September, but I had to accept that it was her choice. It was not what I would have chosen, but each of us has the ability and the power to choose how we want to live the last part of our lives. And Vicki chose a path that I would not have chosen, but it was her path. And I finally got to the point where I could accept that. Now, I will tell you that it is not a path that I would have taken, and I hope that if I get to the point that I have a really serious illness, that I will talk to the doctor and ask to be referred to palliative care first, because palliative care is a team of professionals who treat the entire person, not just a specific ailment or one diagnosis. They treat the whole person. And then when it progresses beyond that and death becomes imminent, then I would want to be put into hospice, because I've had so many friends and family members who have died with the help of hospice, and a lot who have not. And I can tell you that every single time there has been a hospice team there, the passing has been easier. And people often say that it was a beautiful death.